Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most practical decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Micah Remley, the CEO of Robin. Now, Micah, can you tell us a little bit about what Robin does?
Sure. Robin is a workplace experience platform that helps companies implement hybrid work. We have about 2,300 customers around the world, ranging from relatively small organizations to Fortune 100 companies. And what we know is hybrid work is really hard, which is what we're going to talk about. It's very difficult because you're necessarily in two different places. We help connect the dots between those and help companies really implement and easily implement hybrid work with their employees. That's what we do.
Tell me a little bit more about what you see as the biggest challenges in hybrid work for companies.
Yeah, the biggest is there's a few. So I'd say the first is intentionality around hybrid work. I think there's this expectation that hybrid work, you can just say you're a hybrid work company and it just happens. And I think we can dive into that a little bit more. And I think what most companies are finding out is it doesn't just happen on its own. You have to be very intentional about hybrid work. And then the second piece is that it looks like work before, except that people have more flexibility. Well, that's actually not the case. Think about what happened with remote work. Pandemic hit. People spent lots and lots of time being very intentional. Lots of IT budget went to enabling remote workers. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars spent doing that. And then all of a sudden people said, oh, we're a hybrid company, come back to work now, and it's the same. Well, existing in two different places and existing in two different realities is very difficult for people. And what we've seen is it hasn't happened naturally. It has not worked. And I'd say for most organizations have failed at hybrid work completely over the past, let's say, year and a half or 2 years after the pandemic has started waning a little bit, have failed at it. And the reason why is because they haven't been intentional in how they implemented hybrid work. So I think those are really the two big challenges, and happy to dive into some of those details as we go through this conversation.
Yeah, I can't agree enough. I helped 23 companies transition to hybrid work, and I see the same problems over and over again. So I was speaking to the leader of a company was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday. And he was telling me that he just has a lot of trouble coordinating with people. So he was telling me, well, isn't there like a simple tool that you can plug into Microsoft Outlook or something to know when people are coming in or not to the office versus not? Like, how do I know? How do I coordinate with people effectively? What are your thoughts about coordination, and what are the ways to solve this problem?
Well, I would say to the question that you just asked, well, yes, there is a simple tool, and it's Robin, but I won't give an advertisement for us in all of that. Coordination is a very important part of it, and coordination is probably the most important part. So when you think about hybrid work, there's a few things that are the barriers to it. So first is that where are my teammates located? Are my teammates located in a place that's proximity where I can actually get together with them in a in-person environment? If they're not, if they're largely remote, then obviously I have a huge disincentive to going into the office. Why would I go into the office if I'm just going to sit there on Zoom calls all day long? So that's the first barrier that you need to understand is how are people working? What does that look like? The next piece is if enough of my team, some sort of critical mass of my team is in the local vicinity, where are they working from? So you do have to answer that question. And that's one of the things that our platform, as well as others, help answer is where are people, and then connect me together with the office resources I need to have a sprint planning session with them, to have my meetings with them, to help schedule my day. Because when you think about it, hybrid is a very hard scheduling problem. So you really have to get very smart with coordination and scheduling. Because if you're asking people to switch form factors. If I'm at home all day, I know what my schedule looks like. I know exactly, I can plan it out, everything else. If I'm in the office all day, I know what my schedule looks like. I can plan for it. If I'm in 5 days a week, I know what my week looks like. If I'm oscillating between the two, that all of a sudden, like it at least doubles the burden, if not triples the burden on understanding, because I'm now, once again, switching between form factors. And what you see is without understanding and without that scheduling help, employees just give up and they just work from home. And I think this is what you see is that for most companies that have declared themselves hybrid companies, they are actually mostly remote companies, unless they've been intentional about solving this problem. If they've been intentional about solving it, then you can see they actually find that true balance with hybrid work. If they haven't, then typically they're actually remote first companies. They just have not come to that realization yet.
Interesting. So when you're thinking about coming to the office and you're saying companies, people by default want to stay at home because they can't solve the problem, what is the office for anyway? Why should people come to the office?
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing, right? All the things that we've talked about over the past few years, the benefits of the office, research is starting to come out and showing the benefits of the office. So first is we know that from a worker productivity standpoint, empirical study coming out of academia showing that 2 days a week in the office for certain subsets of employees is the most productive. It balances in-office time, collaboration, mentorship, training, all of those pieces with heads down time at work. Related to that, we see that, once again, more recent research shows that mentorship increases by 25% by people that are in the office, right? So we see that happening. And these are all things that anecdotally we felt before the academic and empirical research started showing us that this is the case. And the reason why, and I'll put my own story here, is what I've found is that there's two benefits and two different types of people. So one is that collaboration mentorship piece, which is what I've seen is in silos work really well in a remote setting. Once you have to coordinate more with people outside your team, or even if it's just beneficial to the organization, idea flows, everything else happens much better in an in-person environment because those ad hoc conversations are much easier. The barrier for ad hoc conversations is way lower. I can just ask the question. I can hear what you're working on. Whereas I'd never set up a Zoom call to hear what you're working on any day for a person outside of my department. The second benefit is work types. And this is something that not a lot of people talk about at all, but I'll talk about, is that some people are intrinsically very good about working in a remote environment. They are intrinsically motivated, right? They can set their schedule. They are motivated that way. Some people are extrinsically motivated. And think about it this way. It's a person that can sit at a home gym, work out well every single morning, keep themselves, versus the person that needs to go to a gym and they need to be surrounded by people that are working out all day long because that's how they get their motivation. And I remember early in the pandemic seeing this with a sales force that I had, that we had some people that when everyone went remote, their productivity went up. And we had some people whose productivity, salespeople, then went down, and they're all selling the same clients and everything else. And the only thing that made sense was that some of those fell into that intrinsic bucket where they're very good about motivating themselves. And some people did really well in a sales pitch. They needed to be around other people and they were amazing when they're in that position. But once you took that away, their productivity started to falter. And I think what's happened is that organizations are not having those productivity conversations with employees. It's the employee choice about where they want to be versus where are you best served? Where are you best served from your career, from your productivity standpoint? And I think that is one of the things that we're starting to work through, but we're very, very early days of that part of the conversation. And I think it's the most important one out there that is just not being had. And one more anecdote here. The way I liken it is that for most employees, they're not thinking long-term career development. And therefore, they're like, how I describe it is, listen, I feel most comfortable at home in my sweatpants, eating potato chips on the couch, watching TV. I know that if I want to live a long time and have a healthy heart and healthy everything else, I got to go work out, right? Even though it's not comfortable for me in the moment. And I would say in-person work for many people probably fits into that bucket, is that they actually need to be coached into what good looks like there. And I think most organizations are not having those coaching conversations right now.
That's interesting. So I did some research on this myself with companies that I helped transition. And what we found, we used the Big Five personality test, and we found that people who are high in conscientiousness and introversion are the ones who do best in remote work. Whereas people who are high in conscientiousness do fine whether they're remote or in the office. But people who are low in conscientiousness and then high in extroversion, they tend to struggle with remote work. So they tend, because they're extroverted, they want to be around other people, they're motivated by them, and their low conscientiousness, which means they have less initiative, less problem solving, they're less well organized. Sounds like that's something what's similar to what you're talking about being the extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
It fits right into that paradigm I was describing, right? I think you probably said it more elegantly than I said it. So that's exactly right.
That's fine. Now, and you talk about talking to employees, the coaching conversation. So when a leader, who I'm working with or who you're working with, when they're trying to figure out, okay, what kind of policy should they have? So should they just have a sortative policy, tell employees, you figure out where you're most productive, or should they have or should they tell them spend 2 days in the office? Because when you're talking about it and what I was talking about, it seems like some people will define spending more time remotely. Some people need to spend more time in the office. So how can a leader solve the problem and tell who is who and figure out a good policy for all?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. So and you're hitting on it right there, which is I think it's a conversation. First of all, I think there needs to be some sort of overarching company policy. And that overarching company policy is either we're remote first or we are hybrid, but what kind of hybrid are we? So the expectation, so let's say in a hybrid the expectation is in general that we have people in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever it is. We will allow remote employees, but just like before the pandemic, and remote employees are a decision. It's not a given that remote employees are remote, because certainly lots and lots of remote employees existed before the pandemic, right? But it was a decision. It was like, hey, yeah, this job can be done remote all the time. I'm willing to whatever, or this team structure is okay. And this type of work can be done remotely. I'm fine doing that. Once again, this is intentionality. I'm having intentionality around that. So first of all, I think overall, there has to be an overall policy of, in general, we want people in the office 2 to 3 days a week. There's always exceptions to that. Then the next piece is empowering managers to say, all right, well, maybe for this sales team, you should be in 4 days a week. And I'm going to have that conversation with the sales folks, and I'm going to talk about it with your productivity. I'm going to see what that looks like. And senior people, maybe you could be in the work remotely more often, but unfortunately, my junior people will not get the mentorship they need. So therefore, I need you to be in 3 days a week or whatever to be able to mentor them. And then once again, it really is coaching from a manager standpoint. And the way that we've done it here is that we've had those conversations by function. And we said, all right, here are the goals by function. And we're going to set up what that looks like by team. And it varies by team a bit, right? And I'd say we have like most tech companies, we have a pretty flexible hybrid policy, but we have a very, very healthy office. Our office was 100% capacity. We have no mandates. We don't have anything, but we have set up those teams sort of expectations. Hey, here's our expectations. This is what we think the right balance of work is. I'm not going to dictate that you're here every single whatever day, but functional leaders then have the power, or they have the authority to say, all right, this is what these teams should look like, and let's get people in on these days. And that's how we've solved it, which has worked well for us given our company size. I mean, we're about 200 employees and we're in tech. I'll give you a quick example of where this is really important. So I was talking to one of our private equity customers. Private equity, travel a lot, everything else. So it's interesting for them. So they decided they had to make a rule to be in the office almost basically 4 days a week during the summer only. So the reason why that was really important for them was they had, during the pandemic, a whole intern class fail. And for private equity, the intern class is the one that ultimately comes associates, that then become VPs, that then become partners down the road. And it's the lifeblood of the company. It's where the whole future of the company exists. And they had never had an intern class fail before. They looked at all of the demographic information, education, scores, background, everything else. Nothing else indicated this intern class should have failed. It was when they were doing it fully remotely. And the only thing they could come up with was, once again, they weren't providing that mentorship to the intern class. And what they decided was, during the summer when the interns were there, they needed to be in the office with the interns to make sure that they were getting that training, getting that mentorship. And that made a huge difference for them. Made a huge difference for them to be able to go to that model.
That's a good story. What I work with in my clients is, instead of having people kind of mentor by osmosis, which honestly, there's a number of people. So the trouble we run into when with kind of this asking people to come into the office to mentor is that many people resent coming into the office just for the sake of mentoring people and doing everything else when they're in the office, because they prefer to. It's much easier for them, and they're much more effective working remotely on their individual tasks when they're not distracted. So instead of having kind of mentoring by osmosis, we set up deliberate mentoring programs where senior individuals, senior employees have responsibilities to mentor individuals. They have responsibilities to mentor groups. They have responsibilities to do co-working sessions where they come to the office and they co-work with some employees in the office, junior employees, for several hours, showing them what's going on, what they're doing, checking in on what they're doing. So having deliberate mentoring interactions where those are scheduled but they don't have to come into the office like 4 days a week. They end up coming into the office maybe 2 days a week, maybe 1 day a week, depending on how they're structured. And they're doing concentrated mentoring when they're in the office.
Right. But to your point, though, I think you make an excellent point there, Gleb, is that mentorship is part of their job responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because it's part of your job responsibilities, and everything we're saying is, once again, hybrid work, right? I mean, none of what I'm saying is you need to be in the office 5 days a week.
Sure.
But 1 or 2 days a week, once again, it's hard to do that. Even if you're doing concentrated mentorship, it's hard to do that, because think about, like, maybe I'm a junior engineer trying to learn to program, whatever it might be. Sometimes I'm working on my head down task, but I just have that question. And I throw it out to a Slack channel, or I got to wait till you're free if you're remote. And then I'm trying to put time on your calendar, and then I don't get time on the calendar till next day. And now all of a sudden, think about the time it takes me to learn that task. It keeps getting extended versus if I'm working next to you, I can just turn over and be like, hey, just quick question. Can you look at this code? Is it the right? Am I structuring this the right way? Yeah. Oh, no, you did this wrong. But I'm on. And that took 20 seconds to accomplish versus a lot longer in a purely remote setting. But to your point, I need to make sure that, like, the mentor understands that that's part of the job responsibility, and creating a structure where that can occur.
Yeah, it's all a trade-off. You have to trade off individual time versus time in the office, mentoring time, right? So what part of your job responsibility? Another thing we do for that exact problem is called a virtual co-working session, where people dial into a video conference call and then they work on their individual tasks, but junior people can have a chance to ask more senior people questions about their code or whatever they're doing on the video conference call, and they can do screen sharing. So that's another way to do that.
Well, interesting.
Yeah, it's actually quite effective. As we wrap up, what are your thoughts about what will be the future of hybrid?
Yeah, I think the future of hybrid is, I think it will continue to gain lots of traction. There's no doubt. I mean, we all had this view when the pandemic hit, at the first few months happened, we all said, listen, work's never going to be the same. Hybrid is going to rule the world. It's the Xanadu, the awesome balance between in-person and getting that vibrancy and collaboration and mentorship and friendship and all that stuff we appreciate about the office, without having to commute in 5 days a week. And as you know, work can really be divided. There's lots of work, especially if you're in a knowledge industry. There is a lot of work can be accomplished very effectively at home. None of us would give that up, right? I'm clearly in the office today. I'll be at home tomorrow. Fridays, I work from home. I get a bunch of stuff done. I actually have a list of, here's the stuff I need to get done at home and get some heads down work done on Fridays when I'm at home. But the issue has been, once again, it's that form factor switch is very challenging for people. And I think the future of work is hybrid work specifically is more structure around it. I think what we've done for the most part is we've put it in the hands of employees and said, hey, you're hybrid now, you figure it out. So what have they said? We can look at any of the office data. We can look at occupancy data. We can look at all of our own data for companies that have done that. And largely employees don't come in unless they have to, unless they're part of the job responsibilities, or unless some sort of structure is put in place where they have to put in. But if you just left it to employees, typically hybrid for them, if you'd ask the employee, and we look at it and see the data, they come in once or twice a month, if that, right? If that, because they're not in the habit of doing it. So I think that structure is the future of hybrid work, and not that there isn't some flexibility around it as usual, but I think most hybrid work looks like my team is in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's what it looks like. I structure my Zoom meetings with my remote folks on Mondays and Wednesdays when I'm not in the office. Tuesdays when I structure my meetings with the people that are in office that day, my collaboration sessions and everything. You think about everything else that you do in life, from brushing your teeth to going to the gym to whatever else it is, taking medication, it doesn't matter. You have structure around it.
Yeah.
So for us to think that, hey, one of the things you spend most time doing in your life, there's no structure and you just figure it out, that's going to work. It's not going to work. So I think what you'll see in the future of, I think, true hybrid, as I described, which is in the office with regularity, some percentage of your time will be where most companies land. And I think with some structure around that, that's what the future of hybrid work looks like. And I think that everyone will be much better off for that. They'll find that right balance between in-person time, between that collaboration, friendship. And one thing that we didn't talk about in all of this is the mental health benefits of coming into the office, right? If we look at the mental health downsides of what's happened in the pandemic, we know that employees that spend more time together, like, build better social connections. We know the importance of that in mental health. And there's a real part of that that's important. And once again, I think for everyone involved, that move to some structure around hybrid work will be the long-term trend that we see.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, thank you very much. This was very helpful, Mike. I appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Thanks, Gleb.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out this podcast and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.